All right, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker is Tammy Gregersen, and I have a little information about Tammy. She is a professor of TESOL at the American University of Sharjah. She has a co-authored book with Sarah Mercer, published by Oxford University Press recently, called Teacher Wellbeing, which is quite relevant for these particularly challenging times. So I will hand it off to Tammy.
Hey, thanks a lot. You can see when I share my screen that, oops, I have to wait 1 second, please. I have to go back here just 1 second. I didn't have it on the right place. There we are. You're going to notice that Krista and I were in telepathy mode. Look at that. It's crazy, right? Okay, so now, actually, Krista and I are also in telepathy mode over the whole idea of mindfulness and just finding that inner Zen. And Krista, thank you so much for opening like that, because, it's just so, just a moment to take a couple deep breaths. It's just, oh, I have a minute to do that. Great. Thank you, Krista. You rock. Huh? Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about pursuing positivity during COVID. Now, I was mentioning to my colleagues before we started that it's very serendipitous that Sarah Mercer and I wrote this book on well-being, and we had it published in July, right? And COVID started, its forceful yuckiness in March. Right. So it was, we weren't thinking of COVID, but there were so many important things that, that correspond to teacher well-being that are so pertinent for today. So first of all, I want to tell you that my favorite thing in the whole world to do is be with you, be with teachers, because when anyone ever asks, what do you do? I say, I'm a teacher. And like a badge of honor. I'm a teacher, right? And just being here with you, with teachers from all over the world, there is an immediate kindredship, because we chose this vocation. We chose to do this because we want to have an important impact on other people's lives. We want to care about other people and want to impact the future in a very positive way. And so just, I always feel that when I'm with teachers, I feel like I'm in my space. Much better than talking to researchers. Anyway, don't tell them that. Okay, so anyway.
Tammy, sorry,
Yes.
before you continue, can you go presenter mode if possible?
Oh, sure. Just 1 second.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'm going to see, I've got to get out of here then. Yes, there we are. Okay, so yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. So here we go. So you know what? So having, talking to teachers. Okay, so even before COVID, I don't know if you guys know this, but as teachers, you make more decisions per day than any other profession on the face of the planet. Did you know that? You make more decisions than anyone else during the day. So just imagine and just think about it. You make those decisions on the fly. Oh, do I address that classroom management issue? Oh, did the kid get that? Oh, do I need to, right? Some of the decisions are bigger, some of the decisions are smaller, but it is a constant decision-making process, that whole idea of being a teacher. So not only that, but let's add to it the workload we have, the time pressures, the juggling roles. Krista mentioned that she's a working mom. I'm an empty nester now, but don't even think that just because I'm an empty nester, I don't have my kids FaceTiming me every 3 minutes on, in from the US. So we've got this before COVID, pre-COVID days, we can talk before and during. We can't talk after yet, but maybe next year. So anyway, we even before this, we had a crazy kind of life, and that mouse there on the side is kind of like even pre-COVID, right? But now we've got this global pandemic, and we're looking at stressful days that have become even more chaotic. Now, I know I don't need to tell you all of this, but I just want to draw your attention to why you need to pay attention to your self-care. You know what, you might think that, okay, self is selfish. No, 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 no. I've got to be, you know what, we're so geared towards learner-centeredness, and it is a good thing. Learner-centeredness is a brilliant thing, but you know what the problem is with that is that sometimes the teacher gets lost in it. We forget that there's a teacher human being in there. And so the other thing is that because I'm a teacher educator, my learners are teachers. And so I care deeply about teachers, and I care deeply about their well-being. So let's talk a little bit about how COVID made it even just a little bit worse, because I want to make this evident that self-care is very important, and particularly right now. If I asked for a survey, I can't see all of you, so then I didn't make a poll, but if I asked how much you have between the time your administration said we're going remote till the time you actually went remote, how much time did you have? I'm going to show you some research that we've done recently. That a paper just came out in language teaching research a couple weeks ago. And we had surveyed 765 teachers. Many of us, including myself, had less than a week. We had less than a week. And remember, our syllabi were created, our classroom plans were created with a face-to-face idea, right? When you go remote, you know what, the whole pedagogy changes, right? So not only that, but I have to say, I was born in 1963, which makes me the very tail end of the baby boomer. My year was the last year of the baby boomer. Some of you are maybe millennials. That means you're also digital natives. And some of you might even be younger than that. And you might even be the Gen X folks. But anyway, I'm a digital immigrant, right? You guys are digital, some of you are digital natives. I had to learn all of this. And so not only was it the pedagogy, but it was also the technology. So I would be online and I was saying, hey guys, I'm supposed to share my screen. What am I supposed to be pushing here? Right? So, okay, rapid conversion. Balancing personal and professional roles. Okay, it was tough enough already, you know, getting the kids the breakfast, getting them to school, getting to school, getting the kids settled down, going to lunch, getting, you know, putting the kids on buses, doing the lunch duty, getting home, getting the dinner, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right. So now all of these work at home protocols are giving us what we're calling a lack of physical, temporal, and psychological boundaries. Now, these boundaries before were a little flexible and a little permeable, but now, are you kidding me? My classroom is my dining room table. Time, you know, time boundaries. What? There's actually weekends now? What day is it today? Right? And then the psychological border, the psychological boundaries of, you know, I know how I behave. I know where my mental space is when I'm at school, and I know where my mental space is when I'm at home. And there's a certain transfer that happens, right? Okay, now I'm at home. I'm in that space. I'm not going to take a survey, and I'm not going to tell you about me either. Well, maybe I will. But if I took a survey of how many of you are dressed from the waist up in regular clothes and how many of you have pajamas from the waist down, I'll bet I'm not the only one. Boundaries, right? Boundaries. Okay, now, not only that, everybody, but sharing space. Well, you know what? Just so, you know, sharing space. Look what I've got. That's my husband. He's a professor too, and he's working on some material sciences. But that's our space. We share our space. But some of you have a different idea going on here, because what's going on is that some of you are also having to homeschool. So you might be back at school, you might be homeschooling still, but the fact of the matter is that you're still working with kids in the same space, right? And they need your attention. We've got health concerns. You know, before it was the seasonal flu, maybe a cold, but now there's concerns that, you know, some of you might be living in multi-generational homes, right? Some of you might be living with elderly parents, and, you know, God bless you, right? And God bless them, right? So there's health concerns that are, you know, when I go out, and if I go to the grocery store and, you know, somebody's not wearing their mask and I come home and I'm, you know, was it my fault? Okay, and then of course, we've got the social and physical distancing, the travel restrictions. You know what? Hey guys, travel restrictions, you normally have this conference in a networking situation where you can sit down and have coffee with a colleague. You can sit down and enjoy the conversation, share some teaching ideas. And although it's kind of fun online to do, but you know what? It's just not the same as being able to get on an airplane somewhere new, you know, put up at a hotel for a night and have a girls' night, you know, it's just, or men's night, whatever you want to do, but it's different, right? Borders are closed. My husband and I are going to go to spend Christmas in Chile. He's Chileno, he's a Chilean. And we just got news that the borders were going to open. We were not even, I couldn't enter because I'm not a citizen, so I couldn't even go. Now we're going to be able to go, but I mean, they were closed until the 23rd of November, so they're still closed, but they will be open. Shortages of daily necessities. Now, I wasn't in the US when the toilet paper thing happened, but I understand that you guys had a toilet paper thing going on there. The UAE, we had plenty of toilet paper. We were really good. No daily shortages here, but you know, that's how things worked. But all of this is embedded or even like under a cloud of what we're going to call uncertainty. All of this stuff is creating a uncertainty among us. And it even suggests, you know what, I am so happy that, you know, there's news that a vaccine is coming out and that, you know, we might within the next couple of months have at least the frontline healthcare workers vaccinated. That's fantastic news. And then we talk about going back to what's normal. There's uncertainty about what normal looks like, especially in teaching situations, right? What does normal even mean? So now, I want to talk to you a little bit about a certain. We did a study that came out. We did a study. One big study came out with 2 papers. The first was a quantitative correlational study that I did with Peter McIntyre and Sarah Mercer. It came out in Language Teaching Research, and I'm going to share that with you. And I've got the link, and you can take a look at it. The other is from the same survey, but it's qualitative. It's a qualitative narrative where we did some coding around specific themes. And that one is submitted, but not published yet on that second. But I'm going to talk about that paper as well, because I want to show you that language teachers are actually saying about their well-being during COVID, okay? This is especially language teachers, and it's especially during COVID. Whoops. So now, this is an idea about, I forgot, there we are. So this is a coping with COVID study. We had an international sample of 765 language teachers. We asked them about their coping strategies. We asked them about their levels of stress. We used PERMA. I'm sure that a lot of you know PERMA, the Seligman and Peterson. Well, it's mostly Seligman. Positive emotion, relationships, meaning, achievement. It's one framework for that they've developed for well-being. We also used a well-being index. We also used a resiliency scale. We used a growth. A lot of you have heard of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but they've also been doing a lot of recent research on post-traumatic stress growth. And so we were taking a look, we had been doing some interview studies apart from this survey study that was actually showing, can you believe it? Some teachers were actually thriving and flourishing. Some teachers were actually growing during this time. So the question then became, well, we better, you know, see what kind of growth is happening there too. So we used, it was a growth through trauma measure. We measured anxiety, and then used a health index, which was physical health. So this paper, with a link on the bottom, this paper took a look at a correlation between coping strategies, which were grouped around approach and avoidance. Okay, so our coping strategies, the coping strategies that were either approach or avoidant. Positive psychological outcomes like well-being correlated positively with approach coping, but negatively with avoidant coping. And I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. On the other hand, when the coping was avoidant, those correlations increased with stress and negative outcomes. Now, you're probably saying, well, what's the difference between these two kinds of strategies? And that's where I'm going right now. If we're going to be talking approach coping, the first one is acceptance. What this means is that we're acknowledging that the reality of what happened is this, and that's this, and we're learning to live with it. Okay, so acceptance is, it is what it is, and we're going to accept it because there's nothing else to do about it. We don't have control over this. So I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to learn to live with it and do the best I can. The next one, another coping strategy is emotional support. This is obtaining emotional support and seeking comfort and understanding from others. This could be colleagues, friends, family, but you're reaching out and you're saying, hey, you know what, I'm having a problem coping. Can you help me out? What's going on? Well, let me share what's going on with me. Positive reframing. A lot of you may know this is finding silver, looking for the glass half full, right? Psychologists would call this cognitive reappraisal, right? What this means is that we're seeing the situation from a different, more affirming light, and we're seeking something good in it. A lot of times this is conscious. Some of us do this naturally. Some of us see the silver lining before we see anything nasty, but some of us have to make a conscious effort, right? My good friend, Sarah Mercer, was giving me a hard time at the beginning of COVID because when we would Skype, actually we would Zoom, I couldn't get my hair done because all the salons were closed. And so I ended up looking like a reverse skunk, right? I had blonde hair here and then all the dark hair here. And she told me, thinking she was funny, that 88% of all blondes are going to disappear during COVID. So I thought, funny. Well, she's over 40, let me tell you. So, she was having a little bit of gray root problem herself. But anyway, what's happening with positive reframing is I was thinking to myself, this COVID here, what am I going to do? The guy that's sitting across from me, he's a doctor in material sciences. He's a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania in material sciences, but he doesn't know how to do hair. He does now. So I taught my husband, or my husband read the bottle. I positively reframed COVID hair. My husband now does, and I save, and I will save for the rest of my life, $100 every 3 months, because now there's a silver lining to this COVID thing. I no longer have to go to a salon to get my hair done. I've got my beautiful PhD husband who does materials, doing material in my hair. Okay, active coping. That's an approach strategy. Active coping means concentrating efforts on doing something about the situation and taking action to try and make it better. It's not sitting back and saying, it is what it is. I'm sitting back and letting things happen to me. No, it's actively taking steps to do something that's going to be helpful. Instrumental support, seeking help and advice from others, very close emotional support. And then we've got planning. We're talking about metacognition here. We're talking about devising strategies about what to do and thinking hard about what kind of steps to take. It's called planning and organizing, right? It's an approach coping strategy. So now these folks, these teachers who talked about coping in an approaching way ended up having higher well-being. Okay, and many more positive outcomes. Teachers, language teachers, because this was only language teachers, but language teachers of any language, not just English, any language teacher, they were talking about behavioral disengagement, which was defined as giving up trying to deal with it or abandoning any attempts to try. Okay, I'm just done with this. It is what it is, but I'm not. There's nothing to do about it. Denial. Woohoo! How many of us have, it's only a hoax, right? Oh yeah, COVID's a hoax. Yeah, well, yeah. Tell the people it's a hoax. Good strategy, good avoidance strategy. Self-distraction, turning to work or other activities to take your mind off of things, doing something to think about it less. I think that we have to make a distinction here between what is suppression and what is repression, right? I think to some point, self-distraction isn't as harmful as would be repressing something, almost as if it's denial or disengagement. Now, this next one, self-blaming, it was the least one found, but being the least one found, it also carried with it the most negative consequences. Self-blaming, something about it was my fault, right? So our language teachers who were using strategies of self-blaming, problematic, hugely problematic. In our study, it was problematic. Substance abuse. Okay, we know from all other kinds of research, from research in medicine, research in psychology, sociology, that there's a lot more substance abuse going on during COVID. A lot more alcohol imbibing, people smoking a little more weed. And then of course we have venting, and venting is in a negative way, right? It's verbalizing unpleasant feelings to escape or generally expressing negative feelings, right? It's venting to just to get it out there, but it's, repetitive and just not finding anything, no positive reframing in venting, okay? So now we've got these approach and avoidance strategies. Now, in our well-being book that I'm going to get to in a minute, we talk about different ways of seeking well-being. But in the paper that we wrote, that you have the link, we used Boyce 2013 because we specifically looked for literature on avoiding avoidance. Get that? What do you do to avoid avoiding avoidance? Okay, so first of all, a lot of us as language educators, we know what do you call it? Tolerance of ambiguity, right? And we know that is that if there is a personality variable that does help language learning, because there aren't very many personality variables that set effective from ineffective learners. We do know that. But one variable that is somewhat personality related that does help is tolerance of ambiguity. And guess what? Developing uncertainty tolerance, which is very similar to tolerance of ambiguity, is a good thing to help you avoid avoidance. Take an inventory of what you're avoiding. Actually know that you're avoiding it. What am I doing during COVID that I used to do that I'm avoiding, right? Learn to delegate, right? You can't control everything, learn to delegate. Recognize when you're taking on too much. Look, you know what? And this is something that I've had to tell my kids all of their lives. When you say yes to something, it automatically means you're saying no to something else. If you can't learn to say no, by not learning to say no, you are in default mode saying no without wanting to other things. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when you say yes to something, you automatically say no to something else. So you got to recognize when you're taking on too much. Take action even under uncertain conditions. Look, this is 2013, everybody. This isn't like 2019, March, April, right? This is Boyce 2013. Talking about avoiding avoidance and saying, take action even under uncertain conditions. Wow. Isn't that interesting? Recognize procrastination. Right? Well, I'm going to tell you in a little bit that there's a certain degree of well-being when you need to find space for yourself to do the things that you enjoy, but you've got to know when it's for your own self-care and when it's procrastination. And only you're going to be able to tell yourself that, because I can't tell you. And nobody is going to be able to tell you, but you yourself, what's the difference between procrastination and self-care? Because only you know it, and you do know it. Don't tell me you don't. And then recognize also during avoidance that your ideas jump a little bit more. You jump from one idea to another idea to another idea. You need to recognize when this idea jumping isn't always bad, because idea jumping is oftentimes a really cool way to brainstorm. But if your idea jumping is being driven by uncertainty, you need to recognize that, okay? And then you need to just kind of concentrate a little bit more, find that inner zen and just, okay, I've got, do what Krista says, just find that inner space and recognize, okay, I'm jumping from one idea to another. I've got to slow down and recognize that I'm doing this because I'm not comfortable. I'm feeling uncertain and I'm feeling insecure. Now, I told you about a second part of this study. A second part of this study was a narrative portion. And this narrative portion in the survey, it was in 3 questions. We asked about language teachers, 765 teachers. We asked them about their stressors. We asked them about their uplifts, and we asked them, what advice would you give to colleagues? Amazing that what they said was very similar to what the other literature was saying in the psychology of COVID. First of all, language teachers across the world were stressing about health-related issues, their own health, the health of their family, the health of their students. Online teaching issues, we talked about that. We talked about going on remote. We talked about the technology, right? We talked about providing they talked about how can they provide feedback? How can they reach disengaged learners, right? They were worried about their home life, the balance between their personal and their professional lives, right? They were worried and concerned about their limits on freedom. Some of them said, I never knew how much I enjoyed that morning coffee break in the teacher's lounge. Just going for 15 minutes and sharing that 15 minutes with 3 or 4 colleagues, just saying, hey, how's your day going? That limit on your freedom to meet up with other people, it's stressing them out. Financial concerns and job security. I hate to say this, guys, but language teaching never was the most lucrative. And it probably is one of those education jobs that is the first cut when budgetary constraints are coming down. And many of our teachers of the 765 had already lost their jobs, okay? So that was extremely stressful. And reading those stories was broke our hearts. And then, of course, the uncertainty of all of it. That uncertainty is just the stressor that is the cloud that hangs over everything. However, uplifts. We asked teachers, what are you feeling good about? And everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people talked about their own learning and growth. A lot of people were saying, you know what, I always wanted to learn this technology. I didn't want to have to do it from one day to the next, but I always wanted to learn it. You know what? If ever there was a true case of necessity being the mother of invention, welcome COVID-19. It forced all of us into the invention mode of learning technology and of learning how to do things in another way that we weren't accustomed to. And teachers were celebrating that. Teachers were also celebrating, this one actually made me laugh. The responses of students to online teaching. A lot of teachers actually said that they were happy to not have classroom management problems. and some of them said, you know what, now parents know what it's like to have to deal with a disengaged learner because they're at the kitchen table and not in my classroom. So teachers were enjoying a little bit of a respite from not having to deal with classroom management problems, when Juanita was swinging from light fixtures and Johnny was jumping out the window. And then, of course, the sense of time. And this can be for some people, it could be a stressor because of that too flexible of a boundary, right? But then other teachers were saying, you know what, I even though the time is weird, that I've got these weird hours, the commute time, I don't have to commute anymore. Hey, maybe taking a shower. One teacher even said, you know what, I usually spent 15 minutes in the shower every morning. Now I don't have to shower. So yeah, we're good. So she created more time, right? Now we've got ideas about what advice they wanted to provide to their colleagues. And I am just, this was just the most for me, this was the most uplifting thing of all, because these teachers reaching out to other teachers, and they said, just do your best. Your best is always good enough. Don't go for perfection. You do your best and let it go. Do your best and let it go. You know what, of the 765 people who responded, I would suggest 100, almost 100 people just said, don't go for perfection. There were other people who were talking about teacher self-care. Take care of yourself. You know, we're a caring profession. We're going to burn ourselves out by the time this is over. We've got to take care of ourselves. And then, of course, part of that well-being is maintain a positive attitude. You know what, if you're not going to do it for you, for your learners, but try and stay positive through all of these things. So now, on that note, from the advice from their mouths to God's ears, here we go with what Sarah and I say. Now, what I'm going to be presenting now for the remaining little time I have is information that we have in one particular chapter of our book on language, on teacher well-being. It's published by Oxford, and I thought that because we were talking today about teacher well-being, I thought that the best chapter would be emotion. Because in the book, we talk about physical well-being, we talk about relational well-being, we talk about school culture well-being, but today I'm going to only focus on emotional well-being. So if I might have to rush through a couple of these things, but I want to talk about these different things. I want to talk about socio-emotional competence, the broaden and build theory of emotion, Barbara Frick, emotional self-regulation, and I'll get into all of these in a little bit more detail as I go through them. Negativity bias, that one's a killer, because you know what? It's something that it's crazy, but we all do it. And and it's something that if we just could erase it from our lives, we'd be just much happier people. Emotional labor, which is something that as teachers in a caring profession, we have a tendency to be adversely affected by. And then self-compassion. We're going to talk about self-compassion at the end. Okay, let's start first with self-awareness. We're going to talk about the idea that the cornerstone of socio-emotional competence, to have this kind of self-awareness, we need to know a couple of things. First of all, we need to know our triggers, negative and positive triggers. We need to know how we experience them. And we need to know what responses they elicit from us, okay? That is the whole idea of self-awareness. What triggers it, experienced, and how does it result? So now, it involves 3 stages. Here we go. You need to recognize that you are experiencing an emotion. Sometimes, you know what, and I'm not, you know what, some of us, I would love to sit around at a coffee shop with you guys and talk about whether or not it's cognitive first or physiological first. I won't get into that. I don't know if an emotion is first physiologically felt or cognitively thought. And Peter McIntyre and I have been through this a zillion times, you know, arguing back and forth. You know what, do I feel my heart palpitating and then say, oh, I'm anxious? Or do I say, oh, I should be anxious, and I start my heart palpitating, right? So there's all kinds of different things about this that we, origins, but we're not going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about is you are experiencing an emotion. I don't know if it was physiologically or cognitively that you became aware of that, or became that became a overt recognition, but you're experiencing something. Next, you gotta identify, name, and label that emotion. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more under not feeling bad about feeling bad, but label the emotion, and then be aware of its effect and its function. I'm not going to let this go. I'm going to go a little bit further with this. Oops. Okay. Milky 2019 says, don't feel bad about feeling bad. What does Demi Delvato say? It's okay to not be okay, right? Not be okay. Don't feel bad about feeling bad. Okay. So upon feeling a negative emotion, you need to be aware of it. You need to reflect on it. And you need to accept it in the moment. Now, acceptance of an emotion means noting the effects of it as a stressor without reacting more fully to it. That's the idea. You accept it without reacting more fully to it. And thus, by doing that, it limits your potential to make you feel even worse. You know it, you're accepting it, but you don't go beyond the acceptance mode. Okay, I'm feeling it. Okay. Now, I'm going to be using a definition of well-being from Diner et al. And it's going to, our definition for today, it means life satisfaction, the presence of positive emotion, and a lack of negative emotion. Notice, por favor, that it doesn't say a complete, disappearance of negative emotion, because that's not human. You will have negative emotions. And what's crazy is that a lot of people think that negative and positive emotions are opposite ends of the same continuum, but that's not the case. Negative and positive emotions are two different things. You can feel a negative and a positive emotion at the same time. You can be excited about teaching, or you can be excited about giving a webinar, but at the same time be anxious about it. So you can't say that they're opposite ends, because you can feel negative and positive at the same time. Go to the research, McIntyre and DeWally, John Mark DeWally, they do some fantastic research on enjoyment and anxiety and how they coexist. Okay, so we're not saying that well-being is the elimination of negative emotion. Okay, it's seeking to experience proportionally more positive emotion than negative. Okay, I'm going to talk to you in a minute about the broaden and build theory. That's Fredrickson. And listen, this is a very important thing. Barbara Fredrickson says something very important. She says that when we feel positive emotion, we build up our stores of what she calls resiliency. Positive emotion builds resiliency. So in those times when we're experiencing negative emotions, we can tap into that resource that we've been building up. Okay, so the idea here is that if we experience more positive emotion than negative emotion, we're going to have stores built up so that we can tap into it when we need it. Now, she also says in this broaden and build theory that positive emotion broadens our awareness and encourages us to open up to new experiences and new ways of thinking and doing, essentially putting us on an upward spiral. Okay, she talks about thought action repertoires. When we feel positive emotion, it opens up our thinking and our action to have more opportunity, more choices, right? Think about when we're full of joy, when we've got hope, and when we try and decision make during that time. It's like, wow, the world is our oyster, right? But now think about those times when you're sad or full of despair or anxiety. It's negative narrowing. It's called negative narrowing emotion, and it sends you on a downward spiral. And it's at that time that you've got to tap into that resiliency. Okay. Now, okay. I'm not going to go into any detail on percentages because I think the jury on trying to put a number to things. But what we do know is that if we're going to look at happiness, we do have a certain degree of control over our happiness, a certain degree of control, because research suggests that happiness is somewhat genetic predisposition. We are genetically predisposed to being more happy or more depressive. Okay, there's a tendency towards happiness or a tendency towards depression, which our environment and our choices can impact. But we do have that personality that built into our DNA. Now, at the same time, we have a baseline of happiness. I actually I'm one of those lucky people. I have a high baseline of happiness, right? Some have a lower baseline, okay? It's where's your default mode? Where's your default mode of happiness, right? From that default mode, we can go up when we experience positive emotion, and we can gravitate downward when we feel negative emotion. The question now becomes, how far away do we go from our baseline, and how fast does it take us to get back? So if we have super adverse things in our lives, like a death in the family, or we have a divorce, or we lose a job, our time back to our baseline of happiness is going to take a lot more time and probably a lot more willpower. Okay. However, we can do certain things to consciously and actively enhance our overall levels of happiness. And this next slide is going to show you a few of them. Okay, I think it will. Yes. Okay. What are some of these? Acts of kindness and generosity. Some people call this altruism. When we do good things for other people, there's a kickback. We feel good about ourselves. Acts of kindness, everybody. It's called doing nice things for nice. Spend time on experiences. Oh, sorry, spend time or money on experiences and not things. There's been research when you've got a little bit of extra money, a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra energy, spend it on experiences and not on a new car, not on some. But what happens when you spend your energy on experiences is it creates a moment that you can savor and you can go back to and relive. And this is very closely related to creating micro moments of positivity. I'll share one of mine with you. Every single morning I get up and I put Andrea Bocelli on my stereo. And I listen to him sing and I put on my coffee and I make my coffee in a very special way. I make it only with a Malenka filter. I have to do it fresh. If it sits for 5 minutes, it's already stale. I have 1 cup of coffee a day because I want to keep it very special. If I have it more than once a day, then it might not be so special anymore. So that first moment in the morning, the house is quiet, nobody's up. I got Andrea singing to me in a private concert, drinking my favorite cup of coffee. And I value that moment. It is a moment of positivity. And that moment actually gets me out of bed because I look forward to that moment. Another one of mine, bubble baths. I love eucalyptus smelling bubble bath. And I actually plan it as an event. I plan my baths. I put candles and I soak. And it's a moment that I look forward to. Now, set time aside to watch a favorite TV show or film. We talked a little bit about procrastination, the difference between procrastination and self-denial. Okay, yeah, go binge watch Homeland on Netflix. Yeah, go ahead. As long as you don't have something else that's more urgent, you go ahead if you need that for your self-care. Now, this last part, go for a walk in a park, do yoga, do aerobics, do any kind of physical activity. We know that physical activity is not only good for the mind, but it's good for the body. And when you combine physical activity with socializing, it's even better. So go for a walk with somebody you care about. Do yoga with a friend. Look, since COVID, I get on my exercise bike every single morning because there's a time difference of 12 hours. If I get on my bike at 7 o'clock for 1 hour, I can FaceTime my kids while I'm on my bicycle. It's 7 o'clock for them. So I get to ride my bike and spend time with my kids at the same time, and it's an amazing time. I feel really good after that. So these are some of the actions that you can do to actually increase. I'm not, you know what, I'm not one of these people that say, oh, everybody has a choice to be happy. Happiness is a choice. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are some things that we can do. There are some things that we can do to make life just a little bit better. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I'm not going to be an extremist in this. Okay, now here is this might be a screenshot moment because I want you to think about this. This is another activity for allowing positivity. Let your mind replay positive experiences. So I want you to take a look at these prompts, maybe even have your language learners do this. What a cool activity, and do it with them. Prepare lists based on the following prompts and have them put them on Post-it notes where you can see them, or in a journal, what you have handy, even maybe in a digital place on your computer. But when your mind goes to something negative and you just don't want to deal with it, you just got to bring yourself out of your funk. You can go back to one of these prompts. My fondest memories are. The quotes that inspire me most are, and you know what, I hope you have some teacher quotes in there, right? There are some fantastic teacher quotes that you should put up, right? Some lines from your favorite poems or songs, right? It's okay not to be okay. My favorite film or TV show. The most beautiful thing in my home or my garden is, and by far my favorite is this one. The best teaching experience I ever had is. So that when you've had a bad class and you had a lesson that completely flopped, because we all do, I have them and I have them all the time. And I tell my pre-service teachers that happens all the time. But you know what? I've got these best experience quotes that I can pull up and say, okay, I'm okay. I can be a good teacher. Okay. Now, the other idea, very closely related, and this was coming from Barbara Fredrickson, the Broaden and Build lady. She talks about keeping a positivity journal. You can do it in a physical place or in a digital place. If I have any administrators listening to me right now, people who have already gone to the dark side.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're at time, so can you, one more minute? I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, don't worry, Anna. We're really good because I can stop right here. So keeping a positivity journal, everybody, it means you're going to be keeping these congratulatory emails from administrators. You're going to have the thank you notes from students, appreciative messages from parents, and any other positive notes from people in your life. So that when negativity takes hold, you know what, you go to that positivity portfolio, you pick it up and you learn and you look at good things that have kept you positive. So now I don't think I even have any time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to send my PowerPoint, because there's just a few more tips that I didn't get to, a few more tips on well-being that are in the PowerPoint. And so I'll just send it off to my friends that are administrating the conference. And you can take a look at it. So Anna, it's all yours.
Tammy, thank you so much for that presentation. I also put the link to your book in the chat, and I can do it again. So if anybody